All right, so we're going to look at the unification of Japan here. Reminder: before this, Japan was a feudal state, very small regional governments throughout, and the main thing was the shoguns would give their land out to the daimyo, to the retainers, the daimyo are the landowning aristocrats. You have some significant Chinese influence here during this time period, and there wasn't a lot of foreign influence at all here. Um, Tokugawa Ieyasu is going to win a huge civil war in 1600 and establish a Bafuku, or military government, also known as a tent government, in Edo. This time period will be known as the Edo period very often because that is the center of the government all the time in Tokyo. Again, Bafuku, tent government, it's a military government. The emperor is still going to be in place. So that emperor, that figurehead is still going to be in place. The Tokugawa clan is going to rule here for about 258 years. And during the time, the emperor is still in place, but is a figurehead. All the power lies with the Tokugawa clan. So before the Tokugawa clan, the Tokugawa shogunate is what this will be known as. And the shogunate's a term, just the leadership term here. The shogun. There's about 260 or so daimyo throughout Japan that had basically their own governments. Many had relationships with Europe before this, so I mean there was European influence, but that is going to change here. And they had functioned as absolute leaders. There was not a single government going on in Japan. They had their own money, education systems, own armies, nothing unified. So when Tokugawa Ieyasu wins the civil war, he needs to figure out a way to control these daimyo and consolidate power around him. So here's some things that they put in place. One, alternate attendance. Alternate attendance is that the daimyo would spend 1 year in Edo, at the Edo Corp, and then the next year they'd go back to their home. So this makes them have two households, have spread out their money so they can't gain too much control and gain up too much support among their people back at home. They also, daimyo, you can't go visit other daimyo. They don't want alliances getting made. You can't have your children get married to another daimyo's kids. Why? Again, consolidation of land. Tokugawa making sure that they can't do anything. And also, they're going to monitor and limit foreign influence. Why? So you can't build up more power against them. Tokugawa shogunate is very good at consolidating power around them. But then in the 1630s, they even go further. So this is very early in the Tokugawa shogunate period. Remember, it's 1600 to 1858. What they do is they say, all right, we're going to limit foreign merchants' power within Japan. Why? We want to keep Japan for Japanese. So what they do is the Chinese are allowed in. That really shouldn't surprise you because that's a pretty good relationship still. And only the Dutch. The Dutch were allowed to trade with them at Nagasaki, and that makes sure that the Dutch are the only people. Excuse me. That makes sure that the Dutch are the only people allowed in as a whole. Portugal actually tries to get in. It doesn't work. They sent 61 people to try to trade. 13 of them were sent back to Portugal. All the rest of them were beheaded. They sent the 13 back to tell the story. As a whole, this system's going to work really well. They keep a consolidated, peace, stable government for about 200 plus years. However, because of that, the samurai, the warriors, out of jobs. So let's remember the other feudal system the major one we've talked about, is in Europe. That feudal system, they sent their knights to the Middle East with the Crusades. These samurai don't have anywhere to go, and so you have so you got to find something for them to do. And one of the things that they'll do is they'll become what are called ronin. And a ronin samurai is basically somebody without a master, and they'll basically become hired guns. But they become very ornery, very kind of wild cannons, and start to wreak havoc places. And we'll talk about more of that later. They even try to get some of them to become government workers and bureaucrats. It doesn't work very well. So the samurai are in trouble. The samurai are in trouble here, and they start to lose some of their flair, for lack of a better word. And they're people that are the samurai as a whole didn't have a lot of great things going for them because everybody else in society knows their job. They're following the Chinese social hierarchy. You got your emperor, then you got your shogun in this case, who's basically owning all the land, and then you got the daimyo. And then it's very hard and then the farmers are obviously very high up here, but the samurai don't really have a role in society anymore. Like I said, they try to make them government officials. Does not work very well. Japan is a very urban society as a whole, so this is kind of cultural, kind of social change. They have very much these what are floating worlds. Floating worlds are basically, like puppet theater that they would have, and you can see the puppets here. Provides entertainment and culture in the cities, and they also have kabuki theaters, which combines singing, dancing, and staging and a lot of improvisation. These things are catching off in a major cultural influence on Japan. Now, one thing I talked about there a little bit earlier was that they are limiting Dutch contact. They limit Dutch contact, and something's going on called Dutch learning. The Dutch is basically how they learn what's going on with the world. They're the only foreign interaction that the Japanese have that they really trust. They don't really trust the Chinese that much. And the Dutch learning takes place without Japan. Without the Dutch, the Japanese would really know about nothing going on. That is during the 1700s. I mean, you're looking at about 30 million people. Now, their growth in their agricultural growth is going to slow down, and since they're not importing anything really, because it's only the Dutch, their population growth slows down. So they gained 7 million people during the 1600s to only 3 million people from 1700 to 1850. Main two reasons are contraceptives. When people are getting married late, you see actually a lot of characteristics to what the United States has with contraceptives and people getting married later. The contraceptive method was they thinned rice shoots. Abortion and infanticide was part of it as well, although that was very rare. The infanticide was killing of babies under the age of 1. So, one more slide to talk about, and that's cultural changes. Christianity is going to be a little different here than China. The dynamo are trying to get people to convert, mainly because they want the economic benefits. Wait, trying to change to a religion because of economic benefits? No way, that never happens. The conversion to Christianity seen here is led by Jesuit Francis Xavier. He opens up a mission there, and there's a lot of success. Like those dynamo, they try to get more and more people in there. And there's about 300 Christians by 1615. I mean, you think about it, yes, that's more than the Chinese had, and the Chinese are slowly let die out. And the Japanese, this is even a larger percentage. However, now you're going to start to have some problems. The shoguns as a whole are going to start to say, hey, this is a movement away from what Japanese traditional values is, kind of like the Chinese did. However, they're going to enforce this policy very different. Torture, executions as a whole, and Christianity is going to ground. So in China, they just kind of slowly let it die out. Japan, they literally killed it. And so you have this emphasis on native learning, and that's mainly Shintoism, and that our culture is better than everybody else's. That's very similar to what China had, but in this case, it's now being enforced more and more and more and more. And what you also see starting to develop is xenophobia, the fear of outsiders and foreigners. Think about it, they're only knowing things from the Dutch, so the Dutch very much control that message. And anybody other than the Dutch, they don't trust. That's Chinese, that's Japanese. I'm sorry, that's Chinese, that's English, anybody you want to come up with. Anything other than just Japanese, they really don't trust at all. All right, what do we need to know about the Japanese here? Okay, you got the Tokugawa Ieyasu establishes that tent government, the Bafuku government. They are going to be so what they do, these 4 methods of how to control the dynamo and consolidating power. And even further than that, hey, no foreign influence. Get peace and stability for about 200 years. The samurai are out of jobs. They become ronin and very much are looking for new jobs, including possibility becoming bureaucrats. Follow the Chinese social hierarchy in terms of emperor on top still, and then the shoguns. Remember, the emperor, though, was a figurehead in Japan, not like it was in China, where the emperor is the son of heaven. And then lastly, the cultural changes. You know about how Christianity in Japan ends with death, basically, during this time period, and the rise of xenophobia.